The last transmission from the fishing vessel, Sarah's Dream, came at 2:47 p.m. on October 13, 2001, just as the autumn winds began whipping Lake Superior into dangerous swells. The radio crackled with static, but the voice of David Morrison came through clearly enough for the Coast Guard station in Duluth to understand his words. "Beautiful day out here. Sarah caught her first walleye, heading back to port around 4. That was the last time anyone heard from David Morrison, 34, and his wife Sarah Morrison, 31, whose romantic weekend getaway to celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary would become one of the most baffling maritime mysteries in Great Lakes history. David and Sarah Morrison were the kind of couple that small towns like Grand Marais, Minnesota celebrated. High school sweethearts who had married young, built a successful hardware store together, and were known throughout the community for their kindness and reliability. David was an experienced boater who had been navigating Lake Superior since he was 12 years old, learning from his father and grandfather before him. Sarah, though newer to fishing, had embraced her husband's passion for the lake with characteristic enthusiasm. They were perfect together, recalled Betty Henderson, their next-door neighbor, during the initial investigation. David taught Sarah everything about the water, and she brought out this playful side in him that we hadn't seen since they were teenagers. The couple had planned their anniversary trip for months. They'd reserved a cabin at the Lutzen Resort and had specifically chosen mid-October for the spectacular fall colors and excellent fishing conditions. David had spent weeks preparing his 24-foot Boston whaler, checking the engine, updating the electronics, and stocking it with all the safety equipment required for Lake Superior's unpredictable conditions. David was obsessive about safety, remembered Tom Fletcher, who sold David the boat 3 years earlier. He had life jackets, flares, GPS, marine radio, emergency beacon, everything by the book. If anyone could handle rough conditions on Superior, it was David Morrison. The morning of October 13th had dawned clear and calm, with light winds and unusually warm temperatures for mid-autumn. The National Weather Service forecast called for continued fair conditions, with winds increasing to 15 to 20 knots by evening, well within safe limits for experienced boaters. The Morrisons had launched from the Grand Marais harbour at 8:30 a.m., witnessed by several other boaters and the harbourmaster, Chuck Williams. Security cameras at the marina captured them loading their gear, checking their equipment one final time, and heading out into the pristine waters of Lake Superior with smiles and waves. They looked like they were heading out for the perfect day, Williams later told investigators. David checked in with me about weather conditions, filed a float plan for fishing the North Shore, and promised to be back by 6 p.m. at the latest. For the first several hours, everything proceeded exactly as planned. The Coast Guard's investigation would later reconstruct their movements through a combination of radio transmissions, GPS tracking data, and witness accounts from other boaters. At 10:15 a.m., David radioed his brother Michael Morrison, who was monitoring marine frequencies from his own boat near Split Rock Lighthouse. "Fish are biting," David reported. "Sarah's having beginner's luck." At 11:42 a.m., they were spotted by the crew of a charter fishing boat, the Northern Pride, approximately 8 miles northeast of Grand Marais. Captain Jim Olson noted in his log that the Sarah's Dream appeared to be anchored in a productive fishing spot, with both occupants visible on deck. "They waved when we passed," Olson told investigators. "Everything looked completely normal. Just a couple enjoying a beautiful day on the water." But at 1:23 p.m., David made his second-to-last radio transmission to the Coast Guard, reporting their position and requesting an updated weather forecast. The response confirmed continued favorable conditions, with no advisories or warnings in effect. The final transmission at 2:47 p.m. had been routine, even cheerful. David's voice showed no signs of stress or concern. He mentioned Sarah's successful catch, her first walleye, and confirmed their intention to return to port within the next hour or two. But 4 p.m. came and went with no sign of the Sarah's Dream at Grand Marais Harbour. By 5 p.m., Chuck Williams was concerned enough to try raising them on the radio. No response. By 6 p.m., when they were officially overdue according to their float plan, Williams contacted the Coast Guard. The search began immediately. Coast Guard cutters, helicopters, and fixed-wing aircraft launched from stations across the western Lake Superior region. Local volunteer boats joined the effort as word spread through the tight-knit boating community that the Morrisons were missing. "We threw everything we had at that search," recalled Lieutenant Commander Robert Hayes, who coordinated the initial response from the Coast Guard station in Duluth. Clear weather, calm seas, excellent visibility. Conditions were ideal for a rescue operation. But there was nothing to find. The search expanded systematically, covering hundreds of square miles of Lake Superior based on drift calculations, current patterns, and wind data. Searchers looked for any sign of the boat, debris, life jackets, or the couple themselves. On the second day, a commercial freighter reported spotting what might have been a life jacket approximately 12 miles northeast of the last known position. Coast Guard divers investigated, but found only a piece of orange foam that had likely been in the water for months. By the fourth day, the active search had covered over 1,000 square miles without finding any trace of the Sarah's Dream or its occupants. The weather had remained favorable throughout the search period, with calm seas and excellent visibility that should have made any debris easily visible from aircraft. "It was like they just vanished," Lieutenant Commander Hayes told reporters during a press conference. "In 30 years of Great Lakes search and rescue, I've never seen anything like it. We should have found something. Debris, fuel slick, life jackets, something." The investigation shifted to other possibilities. Had the boat suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure? Had there been a medical emergency? Had they somehow made it to shore in an area not covered by the search? Coast Guard investigators examined every inch of shoreline for 50 miles in each direction from the Morrisons' last known position. They checked every marina, boat launch, and fishing camp. They interviewed residents of remote coastal areas, asking if anyone had seen a boat in distress or strangers seeking help. Nothing. The mechanical failure theory seemed unlikely, given David's meticulous maintenance of the boat and his extensive safety preparations. The Sarah's Dream was equipped with multiple communication devices, flares, and an emergency beacon that should have activated automatically if the boat sank. "The emergency beacon was the real mystery," explained Coast Guard electronics specialist Maria Santos, who had personally tested the device just weeks before the disappearance. It was designed to activate automatically when submerged in water and had a battery life of 48 hours. "We monitored all emergency frequencies continuously during the search." Nothing. Medical emergency was also considered unlikely. Both David and Sarah were young, healthy, and experienced swimmers. Even if one of them had suffered a heart attack or other medical crisis, the other should have been able to call for help or signal for assistance. The FBI joined the investigation on day 6, bringing federal resources and expertise in cases involving possible foul play. Special Agent Rebecca Chen had worked maritime cases throughout the Great Lakes region and knew that the vast waters could hide many secrets. "Our initial assessment focused on whether this could be anything other than a boating accident," Agent Chen explained during the investigation. "We looked at the couple's finances, their personal relationships, any enemies or business disputes, anything that might suggest an alternative explanation." The financial investigation revealed a couple with modest but stable finances. The hardware store was profitable, they had no significant debts, and their life insurance policies were standard amounts that wouldn't motivate murder. There were no signs of marital problems, extramarital affairs, or family conflicts. David and Sarah Morrison were genuinely happy people with a good life, Agent Chen concluded. There was no evidence of any motive for violence or reason they would disappear voluntarily. The investigation expanded to examine the possibility that the couple had been victims of pirates or other criminals operating on Lake Superior. While rare, there had been isolated incidents of boats being hijacked for their cargo or equipment. But the Sarah's Dream, while well-maintained, was not particularly valuable. Its fishing equipment was standard recreational gear, and the boat itself was worth perhaps $40,000. Not enough to motivate professional criminals to risk murder charges. As weeks passed without new leads, the investigation began to focus on the most likely scenario. The Sarah's Dream had suffered some kind of sudden, catastrophic disaster that had sunk the boat so quickly that the couple had no time to send distress signals or deploy safety equipment. Lake Superior is known for sudden, violent weather changes, explained Dr. Michael Patterson, a marine meteorologist who consulted on the case. But conditions on October 13th were unusually stable. There were no storm systems, no significant wave action, no meteorological factors that would explain a sudden sinking. Underwater search efforts began in November, using side-scan sonar to examine the lake bottom in the areas where the boat was most likely to have sunk. Lake Superior's depth in the search area ranged from 200 to 800 feet, deep enough to hide a sunken boat, but not so deep as to make recovery impossible with proper equipment. The sonar searches continued intermittently through 2002 and 2003, covering thousands of acres of lake bottom. Searchers found several shipwrecks, including some previously unknown vessels from the early 1900s, but no trace of the Sarah's Dream. "We found everything except what we were looking for," said Captain Steve Anderson, who led many of the underwater search efforts. "Superior's bottom is littered with shipwrecks going back 150 years, but a 24-foot Boston whaler that sank in 2001, nothing." The case gradually faded from active investigation status, though it remained officially open. The Coast Guard maintained the file and continued to investigate any reported sightings or new information, but leads became increasingly rare and less credible. Family members never stopped hoping for answers. Michael Morrison, David's brother, organized annual memorial searches on the anniversary of the disappearance, using private boats and volunteer divers to continue looking for any trace of his brother and sister-in-law. "We know they're down there somewhere," Michael would tell reporters during these anniversary searches. "Superior doesn't give up her dead easily, but eventually she gives up her secrets." Sarah's parents, Robert and Linda Johnson, hired private investigators and offered substantial rewards for information about their daughter's fate. They maintained a website dedicated to the case and worked with other families of missing persons to keep the story alive in public consciousness. "Sarah was our only child," Linda Johnson explained during a 2005 interview. "We can't move on until we know what happened to her and David." The case became part of Great Lakes maritime folklore, joining the ranks of famous, unsolved mysteries like the Edmund Fitzgerald and dozens of other vessels that had vanished without explanation in the dangerous waters of the inland seas. Maritime safety experts used the Morrison case as an example of how even experienced, well-prepared boaters could fall victim to the unpredictable nature of Lake Superior. The case led to improvements in emergency beacon technology and enhanced Coast Guard monitoring procedures. But for all the analysis, investigation and searching, one fact remained unchanged. David and Sarah Morrison and their boat, Sarah's Dream, had vanished completely from Lake Superior on October 13, 2001, leaving behind only questions and theories. The lake that had been their playground and passion had become their grave, though exactly where and how remained a mystery that would haunt the Great Lakes boating community for decades. Local marina operators would sometimes point out toward the vast expanse of Lake Superior and tell visitors about the young couple who had gone out for an anniversary fishing trip and never came back. The story became a cautionary tale about respecting the power of the Great Lakes, even on the calmest days. Tourism operators included the Morrison disappearance in ghost tours and mystery cruises, though family members found this commercialization of their tragedy painful and inappropriate. David and Sarah weren't characters in a ghost story, Michael Morrison complained after one such tour. They were real people with real lives who deserve better than being turned into entertainment. The hardware store that David and Sarah had built together was eventually sold to pay off debts and settle their estate. Their house in Grand Marais became a rental property, and gradually the physical reminders of their lives were scattered or forgotten. But on Lake Superior, commercial fishermen and recreational boaters would sometimes report strange radio transmissions on the emergency frequencies. Voices that sounded like they were calling for help but could never be located. Coast Guard investigations of these reports always came up empty, leading to speculation about ghost ships and phantom distress calls. Weather stations occasionally recorded unusual atmospheric conditions in the area where the Morrisons were last seen. Electromagnetic anomalies that couldn't be explained by normal meteorological phenomena. "There's something odd about that part of the lake," admitted Dr. Patterson during a 2010 interview. "We've documented several instances of unusual readings from weather monitoring equipment in that area. It's probably just equipment malfunction or interference from commercial shipping, but the timing is curious." The case files grew thick with witness statements, search reports, and investigative summaries, but the essential mystery remained unsolved. Two people and a boat had simply ceased to exist on a beautiful autumn day, leaving behind grieving families and a puzzle that defied every attempt at solution. As the years passed, the active investigation wound down to occasional reviews of the cold case files. New Coast Guard personnel would sometimes revisit the evidence, hoping that fresh eyes or new technology might reveal clues that earlier investigators had missed. But Lake Superior kept her secrets, as she always had. The vast inland sea continued to claim boats and lives, just as she had for centuries before the Morrisons, and would continue to do for years after their disappearance. By 2020, the case was known primarily to maritime historians, true crime enthusiasts, and the family members who had never stopped searching for answers. The Sarah's Dream had become another entry in the long list of vessels that had vanished into the depths of Lake Superior, their fate known only to the cold, dark waters that had claimed them. What no one knew was that the lake was about to give up one of her most carefully guarded secrets in a way that would challenge everything investigators thought they knew about the Morrison disappearance and the nature of the Great Lakes themselves. The truth about David and Sarah Morrison was stranger and more disturbing than anyone had imagined, and it was about to surface after 23 years of silence. Captain Jake Anderson was completing his final commercial fishing run of the season when his sonar detected something that shouldn't have existed. It was October 13th, 2024, exactly 23 years to the day since David and Sarah Morrison had vanished on Lake Superior. And Anderson was working the same waters where the couple had disappeared, though he didn't realize the significance at the time. "I've been fishing these waters for 30 years, Anderson would later tell investigators. "I know every rock, every drop-off, every piece of structure on the bottom. When something new appears on sonar, you notice." The object registered as approximately 24 feet long, sitting upright on the lake bottom at a depth of 340 feet. Anderson initially assumed it was debris from a recent storm, or possibly a container that had fallen from a cargo ship. But something about the sonar signature nagged at him. It was too regular, too boat-shaped, to be random debris. "My first thought was that it might be a pleasure craft that sank recently," Anderson explained. "But the shape was too clean, too intact for something that had been on Superior's bottom for any length of time." Anderson marked the GPS coordinates and continued fishing, but the mysterious object stayed on his mind. That evening, over beers at the Angry Trout Café in Grand Marais, he mentioned his discovery to several other local fishermen. When Jake described the size and location, something clicked. remembered Tom Fletcher, the boat dealer who had sold David Morrison his boat 23 years earlier. I pulled out my phone and showed him a picture of the Sarah's Dream that I still had in my files. Jake went white as a sheet. Fletcher immediately contacted the Cook County Sheriff's Department, which in turn reached out to the Coast Guard. Within hours, a team was assembled to investigate Anderson's discovery using advanced underwater remote-operated vehicles, ROVs, that hadn't been available during the original 2001 search. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez, who now headed maritime investigations for the Coast Guard's Duluth sector, was skeptical of the reported discovery. "We get calls about possible wreck discoveries several times a year," Martinez explained. "Most turn out to be natural rock formations, old logging debris, or unrelated vessels. But given the specific date and location, we felt obligated to investigate thoroughly." The ROV was deployed at dawn on October 14, 2024. The underwater camera descended through the clear, cold water of Lake Superior, past schools of lake trout, and through thermoclines that bent light in strange ways. At 340 feet, the lights of the ROV illuminated something that made the entire investigation team catch their breath collectively. It was definitely a boat, specifically a 24-foot Boston whaler that matched the exact specifications of the Sarah's Dream. But what they were seeing defied every law of physics and marine salvage that the investigators knew. The boat was sitting upright on the lake bottom, perfectly level and intact. The hull showed no signs of impact damage, no holes or cracks that would explain how it had sunk. Most impossibly, the boat appeared to be completely dry inside. No sediment, no marine growth, no water whatsoever. "It looked like someone had just parked it on the bottom and walked away," described ROV operator Mike Santos, a 15-year veteran of underwater operations. "But that's impossible. Nothing stays dry at 340 feet underwater." The ROV's cameras revealed additional impossibilities. The boat's electronics appeared to be intact and functional, with LED displays still glowing faintly in the underwater darkness. Fishing equipment was neatly stored in compartments, exactly as it would be on a boat that had just returned to dock. Even more unsettling, there appeared to be 2 coffee cups sitting on a small table in the boat's cabin, still upright and apparently containing liquid. "The coffee cups were what really got to us," admitted Lieutenant Commander Martinez. "They were sitting there like David and Sarah had just stepped out for a moment. No boat should look like that after 23 years underwater." The investigation team spent hours documenting the impossible scene with cameras and sonar imaging. The boat's registration numbers, visible through the crystal-clear water, confirmed what they already suspected. This was definitely the Sarah's Dream. But the question of how a boat could sit underwater for 23 years while remaining completely dry presented a mystery that marine experts couldn't begin to explain. "Water pressure at 340 feet is over 140 pounds per square inch," explained Dr. Robert Kim, a marine engineering professor from the University of Minnesota who was consulted on the discovery. "Even if the boat had somehow sunk intact, which is virtually impossible given the lack of damage, it should have been crushed and filled with water within minutes." The decision was made to attempt salvage of the vessel despite the unusual circumstances. If the Sarah's Dream could be brought to the surface, perhaps physical examination would provide answers that underwater observation couldn't. The salvage operation required specialized equipment and expertise. The boat's apparent structural integrity meant that standard lifting techniques might work, but the depth and the mysterious nature of the find required extraordinary precautions. "We were dealing with something that violated basic principles of underwater physics," explained Salvage Master Captain David Wilson, who led the recovery effort. "We had no idea what would happen when we tried to move it. On October 17, 2024, 4 days after the discovery, the Sarah's Dream was successfully lifted from the bottom of Lake Superior using a combination of lift bags and crane barges. The process took 8 hours and was monitored by underwater cameras that documented every stage of the recovery. What those cameras recorded would become some of the most analyzed underwater footage in maritime history. As the boat began to rise from the lake bottom, something extraordinary happened. The water around the vessel began to behave strangely, forming a visible boundary layer that seemed to separate the boat from the surrounding lake water. It was as if the Sarah's Dream existed in its own pocket of space that didn't follow normal physical laws. The water literally parted around the boat as it rose, described ROV operator Santos. It wasn't like normal displacement. It was like the boat was protected by some kind of invisible barrier. When the boat finally broke the surface after 23 years underwater, the investigation team's astonishment turned to complete bewilderment. The Sarah's Dream emerged from Lake Superior completely dry, with no water draining from its interior and no signs of having been submerged for more than 2 decades. The boat's condition was impossible by any known standards. The fiberglass hull was pristine, with no marine growth, no staining, and no deterioration. The metal fittings showed no corrosion. The fabric seating looked as fresh as the day it had been installed. It was like looking at a boat that had been stored in a climate-controlled garage for 23 years, marveled marine surveyor Janet Patterson, who was called in to assess the vessel's condition. There was absolutely no evidence that this boat had ever been underwater. But the most unsettling discovery came when investigators finally boarded the Sarah's Dream to examine its interior. The boat was exactly as David and Sarah Morrison had left it on October 13, 2001, down to the smallest detail. The coffee cups that had been visible in the underwater footage were indeed still sitting on the cabin table, containing what appeared to be fresh coffee that was still warm to the touch. Sandwiches wrapped in plastic sat in a cooler that should have been destroyed by water pressure decades ago. Sarah's purse was sitting on a seat, containing her driver's license, credit cards, and $47 in cash. Everything was preserved in perfect condition, reported FBI forensic specialist Dr. Amanda Foster, who led the examination of the boat's contents. It was like walking onto a boat that had just returned from a fishing trip, not one that had been missing for 23 years. The boat's electronic equipment was not only intact, but still functional. The GPS unit showed the exact coordinates where David Morrison had reported their position during his final radio transmission. The marine radio was still tuned to channel 16, the emergency frequency. The fish finder displayed readings consistent with the depth and bottom conditions where the boat had been found. Most disturbing of all, the boat's logbook contained entries in David Morrison's handwriting that had never been found during the original investigation. The final entry, dated October 13, 2001, at 3:15 p.m., read, "Strange fog rolling in from the northwest. Water getting calm, almost glassy. Sarah says the fish have stopped biting. Something feels wrong." That entry was written 28 minutes after David's final radio transmission, noted Coast Guard investigator Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh. If he was concerned about conditions, why didn't he call for help or head for shore? Additional entries in the logbook, written in what appeared to be David's handwriting, but in a different pen, described increasingly bizarre events. 3:30 p.m. Fog is unlike anything I've seen on Superior. Visibility down to maybe 20 feet, but the fog isn't moving with the wind. 3:45 p.m. Sarah is getting nervous. Fish finder shows bottom at 340 feet, but we're supposedly in 120 feet of water here. 4:00 p.m. Radio isn't working. Getting no response on any frequency. Sarah tried the cell phone, no signal. 4:15 p.m. The fog is getting thicker, but it's not cold like superior fog should be. It's almost warm, and there's a sound coming from somewhere, like humming or singing. The final entry, time-stamped at 4:22 p.m., was written in handwriting that appeared increasingly erratic. Sarah sees something in the fog, says it looks like lights, but not from another boat. I'm going to investigate. If something happens to us, tell our families we love them. These entries describe events that occurred after David's final radio transmission, explained handwriting expert Dr. Michael Torres, who was brought in to authenticate the logbook. The handwriting is consistent with David Morrison's verified samples, but the content describes impossible events. The forensic examination of the boat revealed other impossibilities. The fuel tanks were still full of gasoline that tested as fresh, despite the fact that gasoline degrades significantly after just a few months of storage. The boat's battery was fully charged and showed no signs of age or deterioration. Even more puzzling, the boat's emergency beacon, the device that should have activated automatically when the boat went underwater, was found in perfect working condition, but showed no record of ever having been activated. The beacon was designed to transmit for 48 hours if submerged, explained Coast Guard electronics specialist Chief Petty Officer Maria Gonzalez. We tested it multiple times and it works perfectly, but according to its internal memory, it has never detected water and has never transmitted a distress signal. The discovery of David Morrison's tackle box provided another piece of the puzzle. Inside, investigators found what appeared to be Sarah's final catch, a walleye that looked as fresh as if it had been caught that morning, despite having been dead for 23 years. The fish showed no signs of decomposition, no freezer burn, no deterioration whatsoever, reported marine biologist Dr. Lisa Chen, who examined the specimen. It was like looking at a fish that had just been pulled from the water. DNA analysis confirmed that the fish was indeed a Lake Superior walleye, and carbon dating suggested it had died in 2001. But its perfect preservation in an environment that should have destroyed it within days raised questions that science couldn't answer. The investigation expanded to include experts in anomalous phenomena and unexplained events. Dr. James Patterson, a physicist who specialized in temporal anomalies, was consulted about the possibility that the boat had somehow existed outside normal time and space for 23 years. The evidence suggests that the Sarah's Dream has been in some kind of temporal stasis, Dr. Patterson explained to the investigation team. Everything aboard the vessel exists in the same state it was in at the moment of disappearance. That's theoretically impossible according to our current understanding of physics. The location where the boat was found also raised questions. The GPS coordinates matched exactly with David Morrison's final reported position, but underwater mapping of the area in 2001 had shown a depth of only 120 feet. The current depth reading of 340 feet suggested that either the lake bottom had somehow changed dramatically, or the boat had been transported to a different location entirely. Lake Superior's bottom doesn't change like that, insisted Dr. Robert Hayes, a geologist who had studied the Great Lakes for 40 years. Sediment deposition might alter depth by a few inches over decades, but not 220 feet. Something moved that boat to where it was found. Sonar mapping of the surrounding area revealed another anomaly. The lake bottom where the Sarah's Dream had been resting showed a perfect circular depression, exactly matching the boat's dimensions. But the sediment layers in that depression appeared to be much older than 23 years. Some samples dated back hundreds of years. It's as if that spot on the bottom had been waiting for the boat, observed marine archaeologist Dr. Susan Miller. The depression was already there, formed long before 2001, as if someone knew exactly where the boat would eventually come to rest. The investigation team also discovered that October 13th, the date of both the disappearance and the rediscovery, had special significance in Great Lakes maritime history. Research revealed that several other unexplained disappearances and anomalous events had occurred on October 13th in various years, dating back to the 1800s. There's a pattern here that we're just beginning to understand, noted maritime historian Dr. Charles Wilson. October 13th appears to be a date when the normal rules of Lake Superior don't apply. Weather records for October 13th, 2024 showed conditions that were remarkably similar to those on the day of the original disappearance. Clear skies, calm winds, and unusual atmospheric pressure readings that meteorologists couldn't fully explain. The atmospheric conditions on both dates show identical anomalous readings, confirmed Dr. Michael Patterson, the same meteorologist who had consulted on the original case. Electromagnetic disturbances, pressure variations, temperature anomalies. It's like the lake was reproducing the exact conditions from 23 years ago. As news of the discovery spread, family members of David and Sarah Morrison were contacted. Michael Morrison, David's brother who had never stopped searching for answers, was among the first to see the recovered boat. Walking onto that boat was like stepping back in time, Michael reported after his visit to the Coast Guard facility where the Sarah's Dream was being stored. David's coffee cup was sitting exactly where he always put it. Sarah's favorite fishing hat was hanging on the hook where she always kept it. It was like they had just stepped out for a moment. But the most emotional discovery came when investigators found a video camera that Sarah had been using to document their anniversary trip. The camera, like everything else on the boat, was in perfect working condition with its battery fully charged. The final video, recorded at 4:20 p.m. on October 13, 2001, showed Sarah Morrison looking directly into the camera with an expression of confusion and growing fear. "David, look at this," Sarah's voice could be heard saying in the background of the video. "The fog is moving against the wind, and do you hear that sound?" The video captured something that no witness report or investigation had documented. The sound that Sarah was hearing. It was a low, harmonic humming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. A sound that didn't match any known natural phenomenon. The audio analysis of that humming sound shows frequencies that shouldn't exist in nature, reported acoustic specialist Dr. Jennifer Martinez. It's almost like a signal or communication of some kind, but not in any format we can understand. The video ended abruptly at 4:22 p.m., exactly matching the timestamp of David's final logbook entry. The image simply cut to black, with no indication of camera malfunction or impact. But when investigators examined the camera's memory card, they found something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the Morrison disappearance. Hidden in the camera's deleted files were dozens of additional videos, apparently recorded over the 23 years the boat had been missing. These videos showed David and Sarah Morrison aging, living, and experiencing events that should have been impossible for people who had vanished in 2001. The implications of these recordings would force investigators to consider possibilities that went far beyond normal maritime accidents or even supernatural explanations. The truth about what had happened to the Morrisons was more complex and disturbing than anyone had imagined, and it was hiding in the memory of a camera that had somehow continued recording for 23 years in a place where time itself seemed to follow different rules. The first video from the deleted files on Sarah Morrison's camera began innocently enough. The timestamp read October 13th, 2001, 4:23 p.m., 1 minute after the final logbook entry and immediately after the previous recording had cut to black. But what Dr. Amanda Foster saw when she pressed play would fundamentally change everything investigators thought they knew about the nature of reality itself. The video showed David and Sarah Morrison standing on the deck of their boat, but they were no longer on Lake Superior. The water around them was a perfect mirror-like surface that reflected not the sky above, but what appeared to be stars, despite the fact that the previous video had been recorded in broad daylight. "We're not on the lake anymore," Sarah's voice could be heard saying, though her lips didn't move in perfect synchronization with the audio. "David, where are we?" "I don't know," David replied, his voice carrying an echo that shouldn't have been possible on an open body of water. "But look at this. The compass isn't working, the GPS shows no signal, and the water is warm." Dr. Foster paused the video and called for the rest of the investigation team. What they were about to witness would require multiple expert opinions and extensive analysis to even begin to comprehend. "The video quality is perfect," noted digital forensics specialist Dr. Michael Chen. "There's no evidence of manipulation or editing, but what it's showing is impossible according to our understanding of physics and geography." The video continued with David and Sarah exploring their new environment. The boat appeared to be floating on water, but the water itself defied explanation. It was perfectly transparent, allowing them to see what appeared to be stars or lights far below the surface, as if they were floating in space rather than on a lake. "The acoustic properties are all wrong," observed audio specialist Dr. Jennifer Martinez as she analyzed the sound in the video. "Their voices have reverb characteristics that suggest they're in an enclosed space, but visually they appear to be in an infinite open area." As the team watched, David attempted to start the boat's engine. It turned over normally, but instead of moving the boat forward through the water, the engine seemed to move them through what could only be described as dimensions of space. "Look at the wake," pointed out marine engineer Dr. Robert Kim. "It's not displacing water, it's displacing light itself. The boat is somehow moving through space-time, not through any physical medium." The video revealed that David and Sarah had quickly realized they were no longer in their familiar reality. They attempted to use the radio, but instead of static or silence, they received transmissions in languages that linguistic experts would later determine didn't match any known human communication system. "The radio signals they're receiving show frequency patterns that don't correspond to electromagnetic radiation as we understand it," explained Dr. James Patterson, the physicist specializing in temporal anomalies. "It's as if they're picking up communications from a completely different dimensional framework." The second video, time-stamped 3 hours later, showed the couple had found what appeared to be land, though calling it land required a significant expansion of the definition. The shore they approached looked like crystallized light, with structures that seemed to be grown rather than built. "These aren't human constructions," observed Dr. Susan Miller, the marine archaeologist. "The geometric patterns follow mathematical principles that suggest intelligence, but not human intelligence." David and Sarah could be seen exploring this impossible shoreline, their movements recorded in perfect detail by a camera that should have run out of battery power hours earlier. They encountered other boats, vessels from different time periods that had apparently been drawn to this same dimensional space. "We're seeing sailing ships that look like they're from the 1800s, modern yachts, even what appears to be a Viking longboat," catalogued maritime historian Dr. Charles Wilson. "It's like this place collects vessels from across all of human maritime history." And the third video, dated October 14th, 2001, a full day after their disappearance, showed David and Sarah meeting other displaced travelers. The audio captured conversations with people who claimed to have been drawn to this dimensional space from various time periods, some recent, others dating back centuries. "This appears to be some kind of temporal collection point," theorized Dr. Patterson after reviewing hours of footage. "People and vessels from different time periods are somehow drawn here and exist simultaneously outside normal space-time." But the videos also revealed a disturbing truth about this dimensional refuge. While people could exist there indefinitely without aging or dying, they could only return to their original reality under specific conditions, conditions that aligned with astronomical and dimensional cycles that occurred roughly every 23 years. The inhabitants David and Sarah meet explain that they've been waiting for alignment windows, specific dates when the barriers between dimensions become permeable. Translated linguist Dr. Maria Santos, who had worked to decode the conversations with the other displaced travelers. October 13th appears to be one of these alignment dates. The fourth video, dated October 13th, 2002, exactly 1 year after their disappearance, showed David and Sarah attempting to return to their own reality during what they believed was an alignment window. The attempt failed, and they were forced to accept that they would have to wait for the next cycle. They tried to leave multiple times over the years, Dr. Foster observed, as she reviewed the chronological progression of videos. But the dimensional mathematics only allow return during specific astronomical alignments that occur every 23 years. The videos continued chronologically, documenting David and Sarah's life in this impossible dimensional space. They aged slowly, if at all, and learned to navigate a reality where thought and intention could manipulate their environment in ways that violated every known law of physics. They're essentially living in a space where consciousness has direct control over physical reality, explained consciousness researcher Dr. Patricia Moore, who was brought in to consult on the psychological aspects of the videos. They learned to create shelter, food, and even entertainment through focused intention. But the videos also showed the psychological toll of existing outside normal reality. David and Sarah struggled with the knowledge that their families believed them dead, that their lives in the normal world had been cut short just as they were entering their prime years. The emotional content of these videos is heartbreaking, noted Dr. Moore. They maintain hope of return, but also experience grief for the life they've lost and the people they may never see again. The videos from 2010 showed a significant change in David and Sarah's situation. They had learned to access what other inhabitants called viewing windows, dimensional portals that allowed them to observe their original reality without being able to interact with it. They could watch their own memorial services, see how their families grieved, observe the ongoing search efforts, Dr. Foster explained to the investigation team. The psychological impact of witnessing their own funerals while being unable to communicate their survival was devastating. The 2015 videos revealed that David and Sarah had become leaders among the displaced travelers, helping newly arrived people understand their situation and maintain hope for eventual return. They had established what could only be described as a community of the displaced, with people from different eras working together to maintain sanity and purpose. They created a support system for people experiencing the most extreme form of displacement imaginable, observed social psychologist Dr. Karen Williams. Their leadership skills and natural empathy made them essential figures in this impossible community. But the most significant videos were those from 2020 onward, as the next alignment window approached. David and Sarah began preparing for what they knew would be their only chance to return to their original reality, a chance that would require perfect timing and considerable risk. The other inhabitants warn them that the return process isn't guaranteed to be successful, Dr. Patterson noted. People have attempted returns during previous alignment windows and simply vanished entirely, neither remaining in the dimensional space nor successfully returning to normal reality. The 2023 videos show David and Sarah making final preparations for their return attempt. They had learned that successful return required not just the right temporal alignment, but also a physical anchor in their original reality. something that could draw them back across dimensional boundaries. They realized that their boat, the Sarah's Dream, had to be the anchor, explained Dr. Chen. The vessel had to be physically present in normal reality at the exact moment of the alignment window for them to have any chance of successful return. The final video, recorded on October 13th, 2024, exactly 23 years after their disappearance, showed David and Sarah attempting their return to normal reality. The process was both beautiful and terrifying, involving what appeared to be the complete dissolution of their forms before reconstitution in normal space-time. They essentially had to trust that the dimensional mathematics would reconstruct them correctly, Dr. Patterson observed. The process required them to surrender their existence in the dimensional space with no guarantee of successful reformation in normal reality. But the video also revealed why the Sarah's Dream had been found in impossible condition. The boat had served as a dimensional anchor for 23 years, existing simultaneously in both realities while maintaining perfect preservation through temporal stasis. The boat was in a state of quantum superposition, Dr. Patterson explained to the investigation team. It existed both in our reality and in the dimensional space, serving as a bridge between the two states of existence. The video ended with David and Sarah beginning the return process, their forms becoming translucent before fading entirely. The timestamp stopped at 2:47 p.m. on October 13th, 2024, the exact time when Captain Jake Anderson's sonar had detected the boat on the lake bottom. They succeeded in returning the boat to normal reality, Dr. Foster concluded. But the question remains, did they successfully return with it? The answer to that question came from an unexpected source. Hidden in the boat's GPS memory were coordinates that hadn't been there during the initial examination. When investigators checked those coordinates, they found a small island in Lake Superior that hadn't appeared on any previous surveys or maps. The island was approximately 100 yards in diameter and appeared to be made of the same crystallized light material that had been visible in the videos from the dimensional space. Most significantly, there were two figures on the island that matched the description of David and Sarah Morrison. We approached by helicopter because the island didn't register on sonar. It existed in normal space, but seemed to follow different physical laws, reported Coast Guard pilot Major Lisa Chen. The two people on the island waved at us, clearly alive and apparently healthy. When the rescue team landed on the impossible island, they found David and Sarah Morrison, aged exactly 23 years, but otherwise in perfect health. They were wearing the same clothes they had been wearing in the final video, and they retained complete memories of both their original lives and their 23 years in dimensional space. "We've been waiting for you," were Sarah's first words to the rescue team. "We knew someone would eventually find the boat and figure out how to locate us." "The island is temporary," David explained. "It exists in normal reality for only a few days after a successful dimensional return. We needed to be rescued before it phases back to the dimensional space." The reunion with their families was emotional beyond description. Michael Morrison, David's brother who had never stopped searching, was among the first to see them after their rescue. "They look exactly like they did 23 years ago, just older," Michael reported. "It's like they've been living in a place where time moves differently. They remember everything, our lives, current events, technology changes, because they could observe our reality even while existing outside it." The psychological evaluation of David and Sarah revealed individuals who had experienced something unprecedented in human history. They had lived for 23 years in a reality where consciousness could manipulate matter, where time flowed differently, and where people from across history coexisted in impossible harmony. Their experience challenges every assumption we have about the nature of reality, consciousness, and the relationship between mind and matter, reported Patricia Moore. They've essentially lived in a universe with different physical laws for over 2 decades. The scientific implications of the Morrison case would take years to fully understand. The videos provided evidence for the existence of parallel dimensions, the possibility of temporal manipulation, and the potential for consciousness to exist independently of normal space-time constraints. This case represents the most significant challenge to conventional physics since the discovery of quantum mechanics, declared Dr. James Patterson in his official report. The evidence suggests that our understanding of reality is far more limited than we previously believed. The Lake Superior Maritime Museum created a special exhibit dedicated to the Morrison case, though many of the most significant details were classified by federal agencies for national security reasons. The exhibit focused on the search and rescue aspects of the case, while hinting at the extraordinary circumstances of the couple's survival. The Morrison case reminds us that Lake Superior still holds mysteries that challenge our understanding of the natural world, read the exhibit's introduction. Sometimes the lake gives up her secrets in ways that expand our knowledge of what's possible. David and Sarah Morrison returned to Grand Marais, where they worked to rebuild lives that had been interrupted by 23 years of impossible existence. They established a foundation dedicated to supporting families of missing persons, using their unique experience to provide hope and assistance to others facing similar tragedies. We learned that disappearance doesn't always mean death, Sarah Morrison explained during a carefully controlled interview. Sometimes it means existing in a place where normal rules don't apply. We want other families to know that hope is always justified, even when circumstances seem impossible. The couple also served as consultants for researchers studying consciousness, dimensional physics, and the nature of reality itself. Their detailed memories of existing in a space where thought could manipulate matter provided insights that would influence scientific research for decades. They're living proof that consciousness is far more powerful and complex than we've understood, noted consciousness researcher Dr. Patricia Moore. Their experience suggests possibilities for human potential that we're only beginning to explore. The Sarah's dream was preserved as both a historical artifact and a subject of ongoing scientific study. Researchers continued to detect unusual energy patterns around the boat, suggesting that its 23 years as a dimensional anchor had permanently altered its relationship with normal space-time. The boat exists in our reality, but maintains quantum connections to the dimensional space, explained Dr. Patterson. It's essentially a window between realities, though a carefully controlled one. The case also led to increased monitoring of Lake Superior for similar anomalous events. The Coast Guard established new protocols for investigating disappearances that couldn't be explained by conventional maritime accidents, and researchers began studying historical cases for evidence of similar dimensional phenomena. We now know that certain locations on Lake Superior may be prone to these dimensional anomalies, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez. October 13th appears to be a particularly significant date, but we're monitoring for similar patterns throughout the year. The Morrison case became required study for maritime investigators, physicists, and consciousness researchers worldwide. Universities established new research programs dedicated to studying the intersection of consciousness, dimension, and physical reality, using the Morrison videos as primary source material. This case has opened entire new fields of scientific inquiry, noted Dr. Chen. We're having to rewrite textbooks on physics, consciousness studies, and the nature of reality itself. For David and Sarah Morrison, their experience had provided both trauma and extraordinary insight into the nature of existence. They aged normally after their return, but retained abilities developed during their 23 years in dimensional space. Abilities that allowed them to perceive reality in ways that other humans couldn't. "We see connections and patterns that others miss," David explained during a research interview. "Living in a space where consciousness directly controls reality gives you a different perspective on what's possible in normal space-time." The couple's return also provided closure for the families and friends who had grieved them for 23 years. Their survival offered hope for other families dealing with unexplained disappearances and challenged assumptions about the finality of such losses. Their return reminds us that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we imagined, reflected Michael Morrison during the 5-year anniversary of their rediscovery. "It proves that love and determination can transcend even the boundaries between dimensions." The island where David and Sarah had been rescued disappeared after exactly 72 hours, phasing back to whatever dimensional space it had originated from. But researchers continued to monitor the coordinates, hoping to detect signs of future dimensional activity. "The island serves as a kind of embassy between realities," theorized Dr. Patterson. "It appears when people successfully transition between dimensional spaces, providing a temporary safe haven during the adjustment period." On October 13, 2025, exactly 1 year after their return, David and Sarah Morrison participated in a memorial service for others who had vanished on Lake Superior and might still exist in dimensional spaces. The service combined traditional maritime remembrance with recognition of possibilities that extended far beyond conventional understanding. "We honor not just those who have been lost to the lake," Sarah Morrison said during the service, "but those who may still exist in places where our current science cannot reach them. Their disappearance doesn't mean their story has ended. It may mean their story is continuing in ways we're only beginning to understand." The Morrison case ultimately changed how humanity understood the relationship between consciousness, reality, and the possibilities for existence beyond conventional space-time. It provided evidence that disappearance doesn't always mean death, that reality contains dimensions and possibilities far beyond normal perception, and that the power of human consciousness may be far greater than previously imagined. The Sarah's dream continued to serve as both a memorial to the mysteries of Lake Superior and a symbol of hope for families dealing with unexplained disappearances. Its impossible survival and perfect preservation reminded everyone that the universe still held secrets that could challenge every assumption about what was possible. And somewhere in the depths of Lake Superior, researchers knew other dimensional windows might be waiting to open. Other boats might be serving as anchors between realities, and other families might be existing in spaces where time, love, and consciousness follow rules that human science was only beginning to comprehend. The lake that had claimed so many lives had also revealed the possibility that those lives might continue in forms and places beyond human understanding. David and Sarah Morrison's 23-year journey had ended with their return, but it had also begun humanity's journey toward understanding the true nature of reality itself.